Hi, welcome back to yet another podcast. I suppose you have seen at least some of the other podcasts before joining me for this one. If not, you may have a particular interest in the question of will. In this short talk, I'm going to approach the issue in my own way, and I may be in agreement or disagreement with your opinion, even with a lot of what has been previously written about will by a number of authors. I have often observed that most people seem to confuse want with will. They want something to have or to happen. They may want a new car or a pair of shoes, to travel somewhere or wish something nice to happen, like getting a better job. Truly, there is an element of will in this, especially once action is initiated for the given purpose, but it is want. You may wish something quite intensely, but a bit of will must rise up for action to fulfill the wish. I suppose you know the idea about cause and effect. It is a general scientific rule that once required, elements of course are put together. The result is inevitable. Like when you put together two chemical components known to react explosively, the explosion will follow. Or you just kick a ball and it will fly away. Will is different. It is indeed a cause, and will produce an effect, but it lies behind. The will to make an explosion lies behind the blending of the components, and will aims the ball towards the goal. Will is in itself a cause, and it differs from physical causes by being motivated or premeditated. It has a purpose. People have all kinds of wants and many good and bad purposes to back up with the strength of will. Even so, will in most human beings is weak and fairly limited. You can't always get what you want. Things and aims are often beyond reach. You may have ideas about free will, but what exactly is free will? Well, consider your own limitations. You are just a more or less standard human being of limited reach, of limited strength and time. There are obvious limitations to what you may achieve, even with the help of others. I think there was a strong will behind Napoleon and Adolf Hitler's effort to conquer Russia with a huge military force. Even so, all they did was to ensure a painful death of hundreds of thousands of young men of their own nation and a few million civilians. To will something on behalf of others, a nation or a certain group, may just be a too big bite to chew. Actually, these are cases of limited and unfree will. The limitation is immediately visible by the results, and the missing freedom resides in the dependence of others. In this case, of the soldiers whose freedom of will, by the way, was totally ignored by the warlords. The soldiers' stolen freedom of will is just one example of how free will may be an illusion. Let me conclude this question of free will. Your freedom of will only exists as far as it does not interfere with the freedom and the will of others. Now we are not talking about will, but the limits of individual freedom. Even though the freedom of will is considered a difficult metaphysical problem, we have at least defined a moral limit to the expression of will in human life. And I will not move further into that here. My intention is to talk about will as will, pure will. One more time, what is will? You may consider the power of determination following a deep urge to be an expression of will. It is something that starts boiling inside, deep in your mind. Indeed, this will, individual will, with a certain capacity of achieving, is followed by the necessary action and perseverance. Thus you may agree that you are a being with a capacity of will. Then will must be inherent in the human being, and maybe even in an animal, like a wolf. Personally, I consider animals in the wild as being almost pure will, a will to be, a very strong will to express their being, a wolf expressing its wolfness in every bit and detail of its whereabouts, its hunt as well as its care for the flock. Are humans somewhat the same? Are we all human expressions of a will to be? The famed occultist Aleister Crowley is known to have said, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." What will is that law? Obviously, it cannot be the simple execution of wants he is referring to. It is a deeper will, and the law is of your existence, the will to be. I will return to this a bit. Before going any further, let me take you on a detour and visit the thinking of an Italian psychotherapist, Roberto Assagioli. He is the one who has come closest to my understanding of will. Assagioli describes a collective level of will, a level that I will define as residing in the transcendental sphere of consciousness. This is the sphere where, in another podcast, I have placed the egregores. Here accumulates and transpires willpower to both individuals and groups. This is where will of some influences will of many. Assagioli draws a figure somewhat like a tree in order to explain his concept. And he even includes how willpower flows from a superior sphere, and he seems to lean a bit on Jung, connecting the levels to his divisions of consciousness into the cognitive, the subconscious, and the collective. It is the level of the collective consciousness that corresponds to the transcendental or transpersonal in my terminology. The individual sits at the center of the cognitive consciousness, and subconsciously it reaches into the transcendental. There is a flow of conscious and unconscious signals going in both directions here, and the egregores in the transcendental are both influenced and influencers. Influence flowing from an empowered egregore may subconsciously structure the individual will or the will of groups. This represents a very subtle limitation to the execution of individual free will, for an individual drawn into such influence becomes its pawn. I will not complicate this simple picture by more detail. The point is to understand the nature of will, how it works, and how it flows within the levels of consciousness. Basically, will is a powerful expression of consciousness at all levels. On the human level, it is weak and fragmented, exactly as is our corporeal existence. Even so, we need to pay attention to what we lend our will to, what we connect to, and how we execute our individual willpower. It is necessary to understand that there are repercussions which in some parts of the world is called karma. Considering this, however, outside the scope of this presentation. Schopenhauer considered will to be as a reality behind the world, being its moving power. Nietzsche regarded the world as will being itself a basic reason, which is very close to saying it is the initial moving power. My point of view is fairly much the same. I simply put the absolute consciousness of pure being behind it. Will cannot be if there is no consciousness to express it. Will is an aspect of consciousness which in itself is being. It is from this appreciation of will that we may understand both the material and immaterial existence of the world. You and I are fragments of the will to be. We emerge into the world as will, dressed in a physical garment called the body. Thus, will resides in us, and we may exercise its power, engaging our cognitive mind and our body. Will is power. In Nietzsche's words, it is Wille zur Macht, or will to power. This does not imply the power of others, but to raise your own will to gain power over your own faculties. Then you may find the necessary power to direct your attention behind the curtains of Maya, and see and hear beyond the sensory illusions and reach into being itself. Connect cognitively with the cosmic. Returning to Crowley, the law he refers to connects with the will to be. This will is what lies behind every material existence, from the stone to the human to the star shining in the heaven above. This is cosmic will, the powerful expression of cosmic consciousness, the Urgrund of being. What kind of will is this? It is definitely not a will in a petty human sense. It is the expression of the conscious fullness of being.